Not a single white feather in sight. It's really too calm to be a Tekken opening. God bless Sano DG. Looks like Jin escaped at the right time, or maybe too soon. Likely aware of Heihachi's family get-together, G-Cup carpet-bombed the place with Jack 4s, leading to the greatest fight scene Tekken will ever have. Heihachi's indignation and Kazuya's impudence play well off each other. Neither is satisfied with the corner they're backed into. They're both just allowed to go ham here, tearing through Jack after Jack. Kazuya gives it the good old DF2, while Heihachi gives it the 1+2. Like they're in some kind of unwilling tag game, Heihachi bounds one of the Jacks to Kazuya, where he tosses it, destroying the statue of the Buddha, which played a key symbolic role in the prior game. That's the first hint toward Tekken 5's tragedy, and its intentional moral regression compared to Tekken 4's optimism. With no sign of the Jack stopping, Kazuya balls a strike and takes the opportunity to slip out unnoticed. He leaves his father with the self-assurance that the old man's already dead. God, I love this opening. The music's arranged by Satoru Kosaki, a returning name from Tekken 4's soundtrack. This second beat just has everything you want. Almost every character gets a cut of face time while introducing Asuka and Feng, who couldn't be further distinct. Similarly, the theme song follows the upbeat and dark tones clashing, dodging between optimistic ballad and heavy rock. The Williams sisters are engaging in a stupid goddamn 3-day fight. The lighter sections have lighter-hearted characters on display. Modok and King continue their game of cat and brick shithouse. Steve gives Harang a clean knock to the face before Steve realizes he's suddenly developed the same nick on his own cheek too. Feng Wei, the greatest disciple of the God Fist style, goes renegade, killing his master, and goes on search for greater power, tearing apart dojos across China. Leading her on a trip for revenge, one such dojo belongs to Asuka Kazuma's father, giving her impetus to join the tournament, not knowing of her relation to Jin. As Feng looks onward to his next target, the shot fades to Wang Jinlei, a Tekken 2 favourite and possibly the true hero of this game. The song begins to mix the two flavours it holds into one big crescendo. Jin has returned to devil form, and our tragic villain Jinpachi Mishima staggers up from the ruins of Honmaru. There is nothing more appropriate for Tekken than this opening. It's got every strength of the series, between strong storytelling, the large cast of characters for you to identify with, at least aesthetically, and that music. It embraces the clash of tones wholeheartedly to create something endearingly messy by the end. Such a promising opening. The biggest narrative evolution this time is a more conventional and structured experience where character interactions take a focus. For example, when playing as the kickboxer Bruce, boxer Steve will have a back and forth. Or when playing as Harang, he'll finally get his revenge match with Jin. The Tekken series has a lot of really likeable and distinct characters going for it. This was a wonderful capitalization on those assets, allowing related and otherwise unrelated characters to interact or imply they hold deeper relationships than previously alluded. It's another iteration of the storytelling premise. A lot of work would have needed to go into these interludes, and the payoff was a world that feels more alive and connected, which ends up being a method of compensation for other narrative cutbacks. Tekken 5's largest mechanical changes are concerned with fixing errors of the previous game. As far as generic character controls go, Kareem backdash cancelling is reinstated, and there's no generic position altering grabs. Now only a few characters have something resembling it, and the use cases aren't for positioning but more likely setting up frame advantages and follow-ups. Terrain has been flattened out entirely, which fixes most hitboxing issues brought up in the last video. Walled stages return, but their geometry has been simplified greatly to the point where obtuse corners nearly don't exist. And even more interesting is the return of infinite stages. It's a competitive godsend. But this was also part of a great sacrifice. A facet of the human mind is our incredible ability to simplify complex things down into the primary attributes that those things hold. For example, the character you control. Let's pretend it's Paul, for simplicity's sake, and let's pretend you're playing on a console gamepad. The cornerstone of Paul's move list is his forward sway into right punch, the proverbial death fist. This is a complicated movement and unlike most other game genres. When first learning it, you might carefully have pressed down on the D-pad, then down right, and finally triangle, and it wouldn't come out. But why? So you do the inputs carefully, faster and faster, until you get the sway motion to appear on screen, and then start timing the triangle to engage the death fist in that animation. Time to take it for a spin in the real game. After using it in a few matches, you might get a feel for how you can smudge your thumb across the lower right hand side of the D-pad to achieve all three inputs in the sway in sequence. and watch the screen to see if you manage to roll it out. Then you'll press right punch. But eventually, you become comfortable enough that you don't need to visually confirm it. You get a feeling down for when you can press the right punch instinctually rather than having to calculate your every clumsy button press. This is an example of how humans simplify down complex tasks into unconscious actions, so the higher problem-solving functionality of your mind can focus on the actual game concepts, rather than the basics. To take a step backward, this is how you learned every single move with your favorite character. Take a step backward again, in any video game. And it even applies to real life. The controller you hold while playing these games at some point became invisible the moment you held it. You never needed to look at the face to see where the triangle and circle buttons were. You just turned your face to the screen because so much of the process of interacting with your console is all mechanized in the subconscious. In that very same way, your initial astonishment at the game's visuals will surely go as intended. Tekken 5 and Dark Resurrection are among the most impressive games of the generation on their respective hardware. Quality consoles, quality programming, and asset design, the PS2 and PSP's capabilities were comfortably pushed while maintaining a steady frame rate. And yet, the simplicity of these stages means your interactions are easily simplified into muscle memory. They're flat, open sets with no collision other than the outer boundaries, so consideration only truly matters once you're close to the walls, and even then, at a lower level, there's not going to be any particular reason to consider them given juggles at the time weren't a necessary know-how. The point I'm trying to make is, whilst the game has the same, or maybe even better visual fidelity compared to Tekken 4, the player will in time care far less. The stellar architecture of Final Frontier will be forgotten, as the octagonal ring you occupy is all that needs to be considered. Acid Rain has so many details giving it that overpopulated Chinese dystopian vibe, like civilians walking on the bridge in the background and the holographic advertisements, but in the end it's just a rather large square. The adornment of Dragon's Nest is simply that, adornment. This fighting ring is a ring which you fight in. The human mind, which is designed to consider landscapes as either obstacles or tools, will only interchangeably see the outer barriers as tools for damage or obstacles to your retreat. That said, there are stages with visual aesthetic that go above and beyond, places with so much visual ambiance and music it's impossible to disregard the minor details. Poolside may just be an octagonal ring, but the music has such an optimism and the look of the place is so vastly out of place for the series it's striking. It's fun to fight it. Even Lay's here chilling in the background, surrounded by bitches. Moonlit wilderness, a fallen castle in the background lit by moonlight, and as far as the eye can see, glowing white flowers obscure even the playfield. For whatever reason, fields of flowers seem to captivate us. Metal Gear Solid 3, Bloodborne, Nier Automata. The electronic music keeps the pulse pounding and the energy flowing, but it's contrasted with an orchestra that wants to keep the scene emotional and heartfelt. It doesn't matter which two characters appear here, I always end up thinking up some silly backstory for why Heihachi and Jin came here to fight. Snow Castle from Dark Resurrection lets snow pour in through the broken windows. Appropriately, a choir chants over a very passionate electric guitar riff. The orchestra comes into prominence halfway through the song, breaking through the electronic backing. This version of the stage supersedes Cathedral in almost every way, taking a once grim song in a once oppressive atmosphere, instead going for a lost coldness. Given this is sub-boss Devil Jin's home turf, you have less reason to fear the guy, but more reason to feel sorry for him, and there's every reason to do so given this game's narrative. Jin's character has regressed since Tekken 4. Between then and now, he awakens in a forest destroyed. Symbolically at least, wildlife and the wilderness are things that Jun Kazuma hold dear. It lines up symbolically with Kazuya's destruction of the statue in the beginning, and this marks Jin for a rather well-written downfall. He can't hold back the devil anymore. The evil is consuming him, and he joins the tournament yet again to see if he can end his bloodline, to make sure nobody else suffers like he does. Even in his encounter with Harang, his single-mindedness begins to show. Jin is only concerned with his family issues and everything else around him is put on hold. However, there's still some hint in his words that he wants to go back after things are settled. Devil Jinpachi recognizes Jin for their genetic relationship more than anything else. They settle things there and then. Jin never encounters anyone else in his family through his entire campaign, coincidentally other than Jinpachi. Jinpachi is a monstrosity of bizarre proportions with an insane desire to destroy the world with ultimate power. And he's a fucking bastard. Every move he has is overpowered. The only thing saving you is that the AI is programmed to not string certain overpowered moves together too many times. But even then, what could look like a guaranteed win is undercut by his ridiculous stun lock animations. and you can't do anything. It's absolutely absurd. He's by far the most powerful boss fight in the entire series, bar none. I completed every character ending just for this review, and each time I faced him, there was fresh bullshit. Even after 15 years of frequent returns, some interaction I couldn't possibly have considered arose for every last goddamn fight and retry. Half of it is the improved AI in this game, which punishes you for relying on a limited range of attacks with your character, but the punishment Jinpachi deals out is cruel and creative. After beating Jinpachi, Jin's well-earned victory sees him welcomed into the Mishima estate as its leader. Jin takes his seat, looks upon the army of suited men awaiting instruction, and slyly smiles to himself, not unlike his father. Jin is satisfied. This is the canonical ending, and on its own it's almost underwhelming. Contrasting this, if under the likely circumstance you can't bear the final fight, or run out of tokens or patience, and then you let the timer run down, a strange cutscene plays. This villain, the fearsome, distorted figure of this final boss, laments that he couldn't be defeated, even cries. Moments later he's consumed by the devil, as if he finally gave up. The story behind Jinpachi is elaborated upon further in a small cluster of playthroughs in the story mode, but like the game before it, sampling from a broader collection of stories allows us to paint a better picture as to the themes of the game, and why Jin's character arc begins its downward trajectory. As mentioned, Feng Wei is tearing dojos apart looking for a certain Chinese scroll of high value. Through Feng's line, we find that all he cares for is power. Against Lei, he cheers that he can defeat the famed five-form Kung Fu, and against Asuka he throws out lines like "the weak don't deserve to live," and "not fighting seriously would be disrespectful." He's a villain who does everything by the book, a character who's horrifically misguided. His ending reveals him achieving even greater power with the help of the Shinken Scrolls, and almost certainly to do nothing good with it. Lei Wulong's playthrough sees him out to stop Feng, which he does end up doing, but on the way he learns of a deeper plot to do with the scroll. In this way, it ends up as being a MacGuffin for his plot to revolve around as the Kung Fu movie stand-in guy. He recovers the scroll, and surely gets a reward, and he goes on to an ending which tries to be entertaining but fails to amount to much. What's important to Lei's playthrough is how much more it adds to Jinpachi's lore and Jinrei's playthrough. 40 years ago, Heihachi confined his father to the basement of the Mishima compound, holding the weight of a giant stone, surely symbolic of his will to persist and hold back his son's evil ways. He eventually succumbed to the pressure and died, before selling his soul to the devil too. Jinpachi is held hostage in his own body, and it wills to destroy the world. In his last act of human consciousness, his final act of his own free will, he sends a letter to his best friend, the same friend who tried and failed to avenge him in Tekken 2, among the only decent men in this universe. "I need your help. Come see me, Jinrei."